find your flow, follow the map. Mile high dreaming's got your back. Denver skies, trailhead pride. This is your moment.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to welcome back to Mile High Dreaming Kelly Strauch. Kelly is an 8-time certified administrator and developer who's been in the Salesforce ecosystem so long, she remembers a time when Salesforce Classic was just called Salesforce. Since becoming an admin in 2009, she's also fallen in love with coding, particularly Lightning Web Components and Apex. Today, Kelly is going to talk to us about how to stop hard coding IDs the practical way. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. All right, so subtitle here is how custom metadata types can solve all of your problems, which I'm only overpromising a little bit. Big thank you to all of our sponsors, of course. As the volunteer even pronounced my name correctly, I'm so grateful for that. I am Kelly Strauch. I consider myself an OG admin dev, currently working at a great company called Final Site, and I have a much neglected website at salesforceegghead.com. But we've only got 20 minutes here, so we'll get right to it. Here's the problem we're trying to solve today. We need to build a thing, and that thing might be a formula field, a validation rule, a flow, or an Apex class. But it needs to reference a particular record. It might need to reference an account, a user, a product, or anything else. It actually doesn't matter what kind of record we need to reference. It could be a custom object. We just need to reference a specific record. So that we don't speak through this at such a high level, we're going to start with the example of, let's say we have a catch-all account in our org. I know none of us wants to admit that we do, but most of us do. And we want to make sure that no opportunities are created for that particular catch-all account. So in this case, we're going to build a validation rule, and we're going to need it to reference that particular account. How can we do that? Well, we could hard code the record's name into our validation rule. But as soon as somebody decides that actually catch-all should not be hyphenated, and I would probably be that person, this would break, right? Technically, our validation rule would still pass the syntax check, but it wouldn't do anything if the account's name changed. Okay, so how else can we reference that account? Well, we could hard code the record's ID into our validation rule. But if we ask Google if that's a good idea, Google's going to tell us that hard coding IDs in Salesforce is generally considered poor practice. And the reason, if you skip down to that environmental differences, is because Salesforce IDs are unique to each environment. So maybe that account has one ID in production, it's going to have a different ID in a sandbox. So hard coding IDs is generally not going to help you, at least if you're doing sandbox development, but let's all say that we are. All right, so what else is there? We can't do names, we can't do IDs. Imagine a world where you could have your own table that only you and other admins can touch. And in that table, or feel free to think of it as an object if that's easier, same thing, you can create your own ID for the catch-all account. Your unique ID will stay the same for all environments. Doesn't matter if you're in production or sandbox, it will always be the same. Your unique ID won't just be a collection of random characters and numbers, it's going to be human-readable. It'll actually mean something to you as you're building this config. And record name changes, most importantly, won't affect your unique ID in the least. That table might look something like this. The first column is basically just a descriptor of what this thing is for your reference. The second column is an example of what your unique ID, again, human-readable, might look like. And this would stay the same in all orgs. So it doesn't matter if you're in production or a sandbox, you could always reference this unique ID that you came up with. And the third column would be the actual record ID for this thing for this specific org. So the values in this column would change from production to sandbox. But you wouldn't reference this last column in any of your flows, validation rules, Apex, anything. You would reference the unique ID in the center. So custom metadata types to the rescue. I stumble over that word every time, and that's the freaking topic, so that's a problem. This is just anybody very familiar with custom metadata types, feel free to argue with me about this definition, but I feel like this is just a good starting point. If you're new to them, think of them as a custom object that lives behind the scenes. They have quite a few similarities with custom objects. So both custom metadata types and custom objects are custom tables that are made up of fields and records. Both of them have customizable page layouts that we all know and love. You can create list views for both of them. And you can add custom fields and validation rules to both of them. And we'll actually walk through doing that in a demo here shortly. That said, there are definitely some key differences, so let's go over those as well. All right, as we all know, custom objects API names end with __C. Custom metadata types API names end with __MDT. If you want trivia to bore your partner with, enjoy. With custom objects, users manage records on the front end, right? It's kind of a given, but custom metadata types do work differently. Admins manage those on the back end in setup. With custom objects, records can't be deployed. So, silly example, let's say I have a custom object called color, and I have a record called blue and a record called green. I can deploy that custom object between sandboxes in production or vice versa, but I can't deploy the green or blue records, right? Only the object. Really cool thing with custom metadata types is you can deploy records between environments, which is really handy. Custom objects, we take it for granted, but when you spin one up, there's already a name field for you, whether that's an auto number or a text, there's always a name field, right? With custom metadata types, you have that name field still, but you also have a label that automatically comes with it. Interesting thing with this is that name field, I'm skipping ahead. Hold on, let me get to the bullet point that says it. All right, with custom objects, multiple records can have the same value in the name field. So back to my silly color example, I could have 2 records where the name is green and Salesforce is like, cool. But with custom metadata types, multiple records cannot have the same value in the name field. So the name values have to be unique. The labels, it doesn't care, names have to be unique. You can think of this similarly with other backend things in Salesforce, like record types, pick lists, right? Those API names have to be unique. Same thing here. All right, so let's build out an example in our demo org here. We're going to say that you are the admin for Acme Bathroom Stock, a company that sells bathroom products to convenience stores, restaurants, etc. Steve is the #1 toilet paper salesman at Acme, but when he tries to sell tampons, he just makes it weird. Steve loses every sale he tries when he attempts to upsell tampons. So Steve's manager has told him that he's no longer allowed to sell them, and she's asked you to build a validation rule to enforce that. All right, so using kind of the same format, now our table might look like this. So that first column is still just as a descriptor of what we're storing. That second column is going to be our unique ID that we reference in our validation rules, formulas, flows, whatever. And that third column is going to store the record ID specific to that environment. So I mentioned before that custom metadata comes with a label and a name. That first column, we're going to utilize that label. Second column, we're going to utilize that name. Really nice that it has to be unique anyway, so we don't have to build that in. And that third column, we're just going to add a custom field to our custom metadata to store the record ID. So let's build the thing. I'm just in this pretty sky blue dev org, and I'm going to, in QuickFind, go to custom metadata types. And we'll build a new one. If you've made custom objects before, this should look pretty familiar. Apparently that doesn't want to work. Okay, I will type. I'm going to call this ID reference. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but I feel like that captures what we're doing pretty well. Ooh, it does start with a vowel. How exciting. And then the visibility here, we can just leave default. We don't need to worry about namespaces or managed packages for what we're doing. So I'm going to hit save. All right, and now we're going to add that custom field to store our record ID. So if if you were around in the classic days, this will look familiar. This is how custom objects used to look on the back end. But we'll add a new custom field here. We'll make it text. We'll call it record ID. Any guesses on the length? Yeah, 18. We'll go ahead and add it to our page layout, and we'll save it. All right. Now this, I always feel like, is a little bit weird to get to the first time, but in order to create records for our custom metadata type, from this page, you go to Manage ID References. Because again, you can't do this on the front end. It's all through setup. So we'll click here, and that will allow us to create records. So let's go ahead and create those 2 records from our table. So we want a Steve user ID one. I will say there's a pretty severe length limitation to the name field, so I'm not going to waste anything on _ID for these. And then we just want to copy in Steve's user ID. So I have Steve pulled up here. I'll grab his ID. Paste. All right. I'm going to save a new. And now we will do the tampon product ID. So again, me taking off _ID is not like a requirement. It's just me saving characters. You can call that whatever you want. But let me open up the product, grab the ID. And save. All right, we're going to go back here. Now that we have records in here, you can get straight to manage records from the custom metadata types menu item. And I just want to show you how you can create list views here. It'll give you, of course, the default one, but we don't care about namespace for this. We care about that record ID field, right? So let's create our own list view. We'll call it all ID references, no filters. But we just want to swap out that namespace field with our custom field record ID. All right, so hopefully that table looks familiar from our slide deck. So now all we have to do is build the validation rule, and we will reference these record IDs through our unique ID in that validation rule. So let's walk through that. I'm going to go to Opportunity Product, Validation Rules, and I've kind of stubbed this out just to save myself some one-handed typing. Okay, and this is Steve can't sell tampons. Totally normal validation. All right, so you can see the logic of our validation rule is just if opportunity owner ID is Steve's ID and product 2 ID is the tampon ID, throw an error. That's all we're doing, pretty simple. So we first need to put Steve's user ID right here. To do that, I'm going to go to Insert Field. You can see we now have this custom metadata type option. And look at that, our new custom metadata type showed up right here. And then both of our records showed up right here. This was mind-blowing to me the first time I saw this, that records are showing up in this UI. So we'll select Steve's user ID. And then for this step, you always want to select record ID. We'll go ahead and insert that. And then we're going to do a very similar thing for our product ID. Custom metadata type, ID reference, tampon product ID, record ID. All right, need to add a message here. Okay, I don't want to type a lot, so Steve bad. Cool. All right, I'm going to warn you. As we have written it, it's not going to work. Anybody know why? This is like deep, so no worries if not. Let's go test it. But I just want to warn you, this was planned, guys. I'm not messing up here. All right, so this is an opportunity owned by Steve. So in theory, it should throw an error, but you can see it let us add it just fine. The reason is, in my opinion, very annoying. Validation rules will only listen to you if you give it a 15-digit ID. So the way around that is you can make this a case safe ID. And then thank you, case safe. And then if you're like me and you insist on using 18-digit IDs everywhere, because I do, then you can keep your precious 18-digit IDs in your custom metadata. All right, so we'll try it again. It should work this time. Perfect. Item 1 has an error. Steve bad. Pretty sure that'd get me fired, but that's okay. All right, so let's jump back to our slides here. So we just saw how to reference an ID from a validation rule. I'm going to show it to you one more time here in this fancy GIF. You just go to Insert Field, Custom Metadata, select your type, select which record you need, and then always go to Record ID. If you want to reference one of these IDs from a formula field, it's going to look very, very similar. So if you're not already, you'll go to the Advanced Formula tab, and then again, Insert Field, Custom Metadata, ID reference, select your record, Record ID. All right. If you want to reference it from a flow, I'm first going to show you the more traditional way, and then I'm going to show you the way that I like better. So this is the more traditional way. You would use a get element. So you would add, select get records, call it whatever you want. And then when you select object, you would select your custom metadata type exactly like you would select an object. So it'll just show up right there. Then for filtering, you want to filter on custom metadata type record name. That's just the name field. I don't know why they make it longer in flows, but they do. And then this is where you would copy in your unique ID as the value of that filter. And of course, you can just store all fields if you want, but as best practice, I try to only choose the ones I really need, so I would then select record ID down here. So that's kind of the traditional way, right? That's how you would select a record from any other object too. But let me show you a cool thing that you can do with Flow where you don't have to use a get element. So this is going to be odd at first, but it's going to look like I'm creating a formula field, because I am starting to create a formula field. You're not going to save this though. We just want to basically copy paste from it. So what this allows us to do is use that same interface that we saw before for both formula fields and validation rules to get this pretty string. I'm going to copy this pretty string to my clipboard, and then the formula field can go away. I don't need to save it. But then I can create a formula in my flow, call it whatever I want, select text for the data type, and paste in that pretty formula. So this will allow you to prevent having to do like multiple gets if you need to get multiple records from your custom metadata. It's just right there in your formula when you need to reference it. Really cool. By the way, I learned that for this presentation. I did not know that before I started this, so that was awesome. And then if you're a coder, here you go. You would just use the get instance method that's available for custom metadata. And then you can see you can reference whatever field you want in that second line. So I'm referencing the record ID field in that second line. All right, so just to kind of emphasize how you're really going to use these in real life. The second column, you should never, ever change. These are the values, as you just saw, that you're going to put directly into those validation rules, formula fields, flows, and Apex. So you want that to be consistent and never mess with those values. Just to make sure, I would definitely recommend adding a validation rule just for yourself. I certainly do that for me. A really simple is changed, parentheses, developer name, and then that will make sure that once the developer name is chosen, it can't be changed. It's not going to prevent you from setting it initially, but it will prevent you from updating it after it's been set. This third column, you will update these values depending which environment you're in. So something really cool for the coders in the room, you can actually write code to automatically create the records that you need in the sandbox and then update this custom metadata type table with the values of the records you just created when you create a sandbox. So you don't have to do this manually if you don't want to, which is really exciting. It's when you create a sandbox and there's like a place to put an Apex class, you put it there and automatically runs when you create it. Super cool. And then finally, this label, these values are just for your reference. So you can update these whenever you want, however often you want, and it won't break anything. This is really just your description field, right? So this is where I should admit that you're still hard-coding IDs, you're just hard-coding them in a different place. The important thing here is that you are not hard-coding them into your config, right? You're hard-coding them into a different place that kind of abstracts them out so that when you deploy that flow from one environment to another, you don't have to go and write a new version of the flow with the new ID for that environment. So just to wrap up, advantages of this method. Number one, unlike using a record's name, record name changes won't break any references to your records. Number two, unlike using a record's ID, you don't have to update any hard-coded IDs in your validation rules, formula fields, flows, or Apex classes when you deploy to prod or when you create or refresh a sandbox. And if on the rare occasion that you ever do need to update a record ID, you can do that in a single place for all references to that record. And that would be just directly into your custom metadata type. Last thing, there is an idea exchange out there so that you would not have to do the weird formula field route to grab that custom metadata basically path. You would, if the idea is delivered, you'd be able to build that directly in Flow. Fun fact, Process Builder has that, but they haven't given it to us in Flow yet. So I would love you forever if you would upvote that very sad 40-point idea, get a little more traction for it. But otherwise, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Find your flow.